The chains rattled each time she shifted her weight, a small metallic scrape swallowed by the thick walls of the shipping container. For days, the only light had come from the thin line beneath the metal door, just enough to tell her when morning passed into night. Kayla Brown had stopped trying to sleep. Every creak outside, every footstep on gravel, kept her awake. The air inside held a heavy, metallic warmth that never fully lifted, and every hour spent in that dim, suffocating space made it harder to keep track of time. She knew the man who had locked her here wasn't finished with her, and she knew that whatever happened next depended on staying alert. When the door finally swung open, the sunlight stabbed into the darkness. Todd Kohlhepp stood in the doorway, framed by the glare, holding a chain like he was walking into a chore he had completed 100 times. His posture was relaxed, almost casual, but the weapon on his hip made it clear he was in command. He spoke calmly, as if the woman crouched on the floor was someone he expected to see every day. His voice carried the clipped, practiced tone of a man who liked control. He reminded her why she was there, reminded her that Charlie Carver wasn't coming back, and made sure she saw the gun before closing the door again. The disappearance had begun as a missing person report. Kayla and Charlie had gone to Kohlhepp's property for what they believed was a work appointment. They never returned. Their families noticed the silence immediately. Charlie's phone pinged near the property. His car was found abandoned in nearby woods. His social media account posted messages that didn't match his voice or his habits, and the phrasing felt wrong to everyone who knew him. That was when the pressure on investigators increased. Loved ones insisted something was deeply off, and they refused to let the case fade into the background. Kohlhepp had built his life on a careful facade. He owned a successful real estate business, managed dozens of properties, and spoke with the confidence of a man used to long meetings and firm handshakes. People described him as abrupt but professional. He dressed neatly, maintained a schedule, and used his reputation as a businessman to mask the darker parts of his past. Few knew he had spent years in prison for kidnapping. Few knew about the patterns of manipulation that followed him through adolescence into adulthood. He kept his record buried beneath polished clothes and a businessman's smile, and for a while, it worked. While investigators searched for Kayla and Charlie, Kohlhepp operated as though nothing had changed. He worked. He met clients. He answered emails. He moved around his property with a quiet, measured pace. The shipping container sat at the edge of his land, surrounded by pines, discreet enough that the closest neighbor never suspected anything. Inside, Kayla counted seconds, replaying every detail of that day. The drive up the dirt path, the moment Charlie stepped out of the car, the gunshot that split the air before she could react. She had heard his body fall. She had known instantly that she was alone. Detectives followed the trail of inconsistencies. Texts from Charlie's phone came at odd hours and lacked his usual phrasing. Surveillance footage placed Kayla's phone near Kohlhepp's property. Digital logs lined up in ways that made coincidence unlikely. When investigators learned Kohlhepp's criminal history, the urgency sharpened into something close to dread. They pushed for a search warrant, believing they were racing a clock they didn't fully understand. Kayla was chained when she heard the footsteps outside again, but these steps were different. Multiple people, voices calling out, boots grinding into gravel. The metal door swung open, and this time the sunlight didn't blind her. A sheriff's deputy filled the doorway, shouting her name so loudly it echoed inside the container. She stared for a moment, unable to process what she was hearing, unable to believe the nightmare had ended. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. She told them about Charlie. She told them Kohlhepp had killed him, and then she told them there were more. The property quickly transformed into a massive crime scene. Investigators combed through acres of land with cadaver dogs and excavation equipment. Forensic teams marked off sections of dirt with flags and tape. The rescuers' relief at finding Kayla alive hardened into grim determination as they began digging. Kohlhepp's facade collapsed instantly, and the truth beneath it stunned even seasoned detectives. He led authorities to graves he had dug before she arrived, pointing out exact locations with the casual precision of a man identifying storage boxes. The accounts spilled out one by one. Years earlier, 4 people had been murdered at the Superbike Motorsports shop. The scene had baffled investigators. No robbery, no forced entry, no clear motive. The killer had walked in, shot everyone inside, and disappeared. Kohlhepp confessed to all 4 deaths, describing how he had felt slighted during a previous visit and how the bitterness festered until he returned with a gun. His description of the incident was delivered without emotion, like he was recounting a business meeting rather than the end of 4 lives. On his land, investigators uncovered more victims, a couple who had gone missing while doing repairs for him, a man he claimed had tried to steal from him. Each grave offered the same story: controlled violence, careful planning, and a killer who believed he could manage every detail. For years, he had hidden in plain sight, building a life that looked stable enough to mask what he was doing beneath the surface. Kayla's rescue shattered that illusion. The public learned about the shipping container, the chains, the padlocks, and the routine way Kohlhepp had treated her captivity. News crews lined the road outside his property. Former clients tried to reconcile the man they had known with the crimes being revealed. Prosecutors moved quickly, building a case that reflected the scale of what investigators uncovered. In court, Kohlhepp faced 7 murder charges, along with kidnapping and sexual assault. He listened as families described years of grief and confusion, years spent wondering what had happened to their loved ones. He offered detailed statements but showed little remorse. His demeanor stayed steady, the same controlled posture he used in real estate meetings. The mask had fallen, but the man behind it barely reacted. Kayla testified about her time in the container, about the days she spent wondering if she would ever be found. Her account anchored the case, transforming the legal proceedings into a reminder of what had been taken and what had been narrowly saved. When the sentencing came, Kohlhepp received multiple life terms with no chance of parole. The courtroom exhaled as the judge read the decision. Investigators continued digging through his digital trail long after the trial ended, searching for any indication of other victims. Some posts hinted at violent fantasies, others at experiences he claimed to have had but never fully proved. Whether all his claims were true remained uncertain, but the graves on his property told enough of the story. Kayla rebuilt her life with the knowledge that her survival had exposed a serial killer who might have continued unchecked. The families of the other victims finally had answers, painful ones, but answers nonetheless. Kohlhepp disappeared into the prison system, stripped of the control he had spent years cultivating. The shipping container remained as investigators had found it. Chains on the floor, the thin line of light under the door, and the marks left behind by the woman who lived long enough to bring the truth into the open. Thank you for listening to Homicide Files. Subscribe for more true crime stories.